Welcome to ChannelWaves, the podcast where channel leaders share success strategies, best practices, and emerging trends. Brought to you by Structured Web. Here's your host, Stephen Kellum.
Hey, welcome everyone to ChannelWaves podcast, Structured Web's view into everything channel. I'm your host, Stephen Kellum, and very excited to have Jamie Mendez joining us today. Welcome, Jamie.
Hi, Steve. Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. So Jamie is the Vice President of Ecosystem Transformation and Programs at Pega Systems. So maybe you could just take a moment, tell everyone a little bit, just real briefly, about your background, a little bit of history, and maybe a little bit about Pega Systems too.
Sure. So I've been in the partner environment for longer than I care to admit, many years. And through that, worked with all kinds of partner types from, the traditional channel partner, the old VAR reseller model through, as that community evolved into solution providers, ISVs, regional system integrators, global system integrators. And really over the last probably 10 or 15 years, I've worked in the ecosystem and building ecosystems of ecosystems, finding core partners, an ISV, looking at their ecosystem of partners, marrying that ecosystem of partners with other partners who brought complementary value to the table for the client. So I've been in and around partner operations, channel management, selling, marketing for many years, and have learned a lot and seen a lot of change. And what I did become and built some skill around is designing change and managing change. Change is hard. Change means I'm asking people to give up things for new things. And while people love new things, giving up something typically creates an emotional response at some level. People are either super excited or super protective, and you have to kind of manage your way through that. So, operationally, I've been focused on that for a few years, and I joined Pega Systems 2 years ago as Pega was really trying to evolve its partner ecosystem to really have the partners participate in a greater way around the co-selling, selling motion in the journey with our clients, and start that motion earlier so that when we got to delivery, and our partners provide most delivery support around Pega Systems solutions. We are a platform that can be designed to address many of the most complex issues that our clients face. When you get partners involved early and they understand the client pain points, the opportunities, they have more time to really digest that, build the right approach to the project, the right implementation strategy. So that's the kind of operational model we're putting in place and working with our partners to evolve over time. We have a small ecosystem, but that ecosystem drives our business and very important to our success.
So there's two things I want to talk about.
Okay.
By the way, listeners or viewers, we're gonna talk about how do you do more with less. And I know everybody's talking about how do you do more with less, but we're gonna look at it from a strategic perspective because I think it involves two things you were talking about. One, it involves the ecosystem. And by the way, you got to say ecosystem before I did, so we had to bring it in somewhere.
So I win.
You win. And when we're going to talk ecosystem, beyond partners, your ecosystem really, from my perspective, when you're running a channel, is the partners that you sell with, the partners you sell to, the resources, human resources that you have, and even the technology that's in there, right? It all forms a pretty broad ecosystem. The interesting thing is they're all changing, and they were all step back for a second. They were all changing anyways during the pandemic. Then they were all changing post the pandemic. And then you took those changes and said, now we need to do more with less, which is not a change I'm not sure everybody was really looking forward to, but it is where we are. So I think we're gonna talk about those changes. The place I'd like to start with is, what's the partner's perspective on this? Because so many of the conversations that I've had with people have been, okay, here's how I'm going to change for vendors. Here's how I'm going to change my programs. Here's going to lay out my resources. And the first thing that comes to mind to me is, how is that going to affect our partner relationships, their go-to-market strategy, and how that all really affects the partner?
Yeah, well, I think it depends on which partners we're talking about and how you react. I mean, at the end of the day, some of our biggest partners are going through some of the same challenges we're going through.
Sure.
Our clients are all being very cautious People are still kind of uncertain about the economy. Some are saying it's a disaster. Some are saying it's not so bad.
Right.
But most all clients are moving very cautiously. So buying decisions are being prolonged. That cycle is being prolonged a bit.
Sure.
So everybody's facing the same situation. And what I find is the partners want to have conversations about those challenges and ensure alignment in the decisions we're making, because we're all having to make trade-off decisions on how to prioritize.
Sure.
And what to prioritize on, and what the downstream implications are going to be. And they want to have that conversation. Their expectation and their ask is, don't make a decision until we can kind of make sure that those decisions, the impact of those decisions will be on the decisions we now have to make. So
Sure.
we've had partners calling us and saying, look, we're going to have to make some reassignments, reprioritizations, cuts. This is where we're thinking about doing it. What will that look like on your side? If we do this, what will the longer term implication be? Will there be any longer term implications? So alignment, transparency and alignment is critical in these times. One, for making sure you're not fighting each other, right? And creating collisions in market, but building trust. It's like,
Sure.
Marriages aren't made from the happy times. Marriages are made from the difficult times when you're challenged, and you work together to get through those difficult times and come out the other end. And that's true of our partnerships. I hate to use the marriage analogy, but we are committed to each other, right? In these partnerships, and we have to be willing to talk about the things that aren't comfortable. And that's what we're seeing. And hopefully our partners are seeing that we're willing to, and are actively having these conversations about how can we do this together and get through these tough times together.
I think that's a great way to look at it. It's a couple things. One is a commitment is something I think really important. And I think that's the best thing about a marriage, right? You choose to commit. I don't know, partners in a relationship, marriage.
Yeah, I know. That's why I apologize a little bit for the analogy, but it's, like I relate.
Yeah.
It's something I understand, but it's any relationship. It doesn't have to be marriage. It could be your best, your BFF, right?
No. Look, I think I agree with you. I think transparency in any relationship. And does that mean you have to have some of the hard conversations? So the questions are, they may not have enough resources and you have less resources. Where's the middle ground on that? And that's not the easiest conversation to have, right? Because you're mutually dependent. And I guess it would depend on the type of partner and how critical each one's is to each other.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, what are we all trying to do? We're all trying to serve a client.
Right.
So if we start with the client and we start backing away from the client in the conversation of what do we need to serve that client? How do we together go to that client? Which resources are needed? Which activities are needed to make all of that happen? And it makes the conversation easier, because when it starts to get difficult, you come back to how are we serving the client? And if you can keep reminding yourself of that, you can get through the conversation easier. Because we have been in conversations where somebody feels very strongly about a program that we agreed to in December, and now do we keep doing it? Well, is that the best way to serve that client at this point in time? Based on what is the client going through? Is the client downsizing? Is the client changing their strategy based on economic conditions? So that seems to be the right area to start with, and keep asking yourself, what are they trying to do? How can we best serve them? And it seems obvious, but it's still hard to get yourself to come back to those, especially when you're really invested in something that you already agreed to, and now you're finding you have to revisit it. That's hard to do. Those are not easy conversations to have. So you've got to find that grounding point.
I think it's interesting. You said it sounds obvious. I'm not so sure it is, because you have pundits out there. Sorry, pundits is probably the wrong word. You have consultants out there. You have groups like Forrester who are doing very well, talking about how we need to all look at the client perspective first. How are they going to buy? What do they want to do? What do they want to accomplish? And they're constantly reminding us as we put our programs together, whether it's an India program or an incentive program or whatever that program is with the partner, to think about the end user. And I do think that is the way to do it. And the other thing I think about, you made me think about, is when you manage someone, if you have something, if you're going through a review with someone and you're trying to work with someone and have a difficult conversation, it's much easier if you have a different focal point than them and you're actually talking about how you get somewhere else together.
Yeah.
That's like an age-old wise way to manage someone anyways, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny because I was just thinking about when you were saying that we were on a client call. We're doing a delivery review, and the team was talking about a challenge that the client was having with scope creep, and the business team and the client was wanting to add functionality, feature sets, scope.
Yeah.
And the IT team at the client was saying, this was the scope we signed up for. This is the delivery, date we're going to. And they were both emotionally invested, and the partner and Pega were sitting on the outside listening to this and thinking and trying to help them see
Right.
that they were each taking a different perspective on what the scope was, and they had to come back to what is more important, solving a specific initial prioritization or moving to a different one, or being okay with missing the date. Like, you can make all kinds of decisions in that. None of them are wrong.
Right.
It's getting the team to agree on the shift.
Right.
And again, that meant somebody had to give something up. And that's, I had a business mentor, remind me to go back and reread, what is it? Getting to Yes.
Uh-huh.
It's like such an old book, but the principles of reminding, going back to what do we have in common at stake is just, has to be the pillar of every conversation. And I just have gone back recently and reread that to keep asking myself, okay, if I'm at an impasse, I'm unsure, what is the common milestone that we all have to hit here? Or what is the common interest that we all have? And if I can keep bringing everybody back to that, then we can keep the conversation going. We don't have people, digging in on a specific point of view. And these are not easy conversations, as I said. So you got to pick something to focus on, as you said.
Well, in particular, if there are less resources. So let me just going down that path. One more point. If there are less resources involved, you either need to get to a decision quicker. I mean, you have finite, I think both of you have to figure out when you're dealing with that client, you have finite resources. At some point, somebody has to make a decision, because do you find there's any impatience in that? Oh, so that's...
No, but I find there's people pleasers. There's people pleasers everywhere, right? So what I find is somebody's going to come to the rescue and sign up to do something that is mostly impossible. And sometimes they will end up doing it. And that's, superhuman, far out. Thank you for working 24/7 for the last 3 weeks to make that happen.
Right.
But the unfortunate issue is that more times people can't do all that work, and even though they will try to do the extend themselves beyond human capability, it's just not possible. So they take it on themselves. And I try to do that sometimes too. And I have people on my team, I see them doing that, and I have to say, please, like, your job is not to work 24/7. Let's be reasonable here. This is a long journey we're on together. Let's not kill ourselves in the first mile. Like, let's be reasonable about this. And it's hard when you really want somebody to be, or a project to be successful, or a team to be successful. It's really hard pulling back and saying, that's not possible in realistic terms, because we don't have the resources, we don't have the money, we don't have the time, whatever the thing is that you've had to remove. You have to be careful that the people pleasers don't jump in to save the day.
So that gets me to the second one. That's a human resource. So we'll talk about the partners, and then we'll talk about human resources. Then let's talk about the automation, maybe technology, and then we'll end it up with maybe innovation. But so you just jumped into the human side. And so how do you coach that? How do you manage that? I've had people who work for me that wanted to do everything, and they couldn't say no. And the problem was, if you can't say no and you can't deliver it, you not only hurt yourself, you hurt the whole project.
I think it's that conversation, right? Is giving them permission by helping them understand that you can't, no one can do it all. And we don't have to do it all. We have to be reasonable. We have to set expectations and deliver against expectations. That's the conversation. I'm not saying I've successfully done it in every conversation, because again, I've been guilty of this. I've seen people on my team still do it, and it's all for the right reason. And when you have somebody that's doing something for the right reason, it's hard to coach them out of it sometimes. But I think in the volume of change, we've had so much change in this last year. I mean, everyone says it's unprecedented and it's cliche, but I just think about, it's not just the big news changes that have been going on, but all the reaction to that down below it. And it's been personal, community, professional. It's a lot. And I think it's a little bit easier. I don't know. I just find people are a little more open than they've ever been to these kind of tough conversations and being more vulnerable.
Right.
And I find that I have to be vulnerable in order to have these conversations.
I was going to say, how do you actually get people to do that? By the way, if you're doing that and you got your team to do it, that's fantastic, because I don't think that's the norm.
Yeah, I look, again, 100% no, but I feel that, and I don't know, maybe we should get my team on the call to have this conversation, but I've pretty much taken, I used to be a closed book. I didn't talk about anything personal. I didn't reveal. I, would never share my failures. I now openly share my failures. I openly share my vulnerabilities, my fears, to a certain degree. Like, I can't do it to the point where I'm making other people scared, right? But because that's the other thing. Like, there's a fine line leaders have to walk of being vulnerable, but not so vulnerable that people can't have confidence that you know what you're doing and you'll get the job done or lead them to get the job done. So there's a fine line that you have to walk on being willing to be vulnerable, to have your team vulnerable so you can have those conversations, those tough conversations. And then you've got to commit to the people to make them successful and hold them up and ensure they're successful. Not do the job for them, but arm them, commit to them, make sure that they have the support that they need. And these are leadership lessons that we've been prepared in getting for years now, right? And we're learning more as post-COVID times are changing us yet again. We're learning more about what our employees need to be successful and what our partners need to be successful. And a lot of this is, today we have to be open and flexible, but clear on our expectations, because we can't be so flexible that we can't run a business. And I think in some ways we've been testing the boundaries of that a little bit, right? And so some companies are pulling way back in and saying everybody back to the office. Some companies,
that's what I was thinking of. I was thinking of work from home, don't work from home. What's in the middle? We got very, very flexible for quite a long time on that.
And now most companies are trying to find, where's the line in hybrid? Have some people in some of the times, most of the people in some of the time. And every company's got their own culture and are defining those rules. And they just need to be clear on what the expectation is. And as we work with partners, we need to understand, what are their boundaries? What are their work styles? How is their culture changed? And what are we doing to support that as part of our business model as much as we can? And those, again, it comes back to constant conversations about alignment. Are we aligned as organizations in our go-to-market, in our culture, in our aspirations and our goals? What are the roles we're expecting of each other? And when there's conflict of any kind, how do we manage that conflict? What are our escalation agreements on these things? Because we are going to hit impasses. But as long as we understand how we're both going to handle those, we're going to get through it, and it's going to be productive, and we're going to learn from it. And that's what we hope for.
Personal question.
Mhm.
Like, I'll admit, my weakness has been patience. And one of the things that I've had to work on in the past couple of years going through this has been patience. So I'm being vulnerable. That was the thing that just wasn't there for me. And I really had to work on that. Anything for you in particular that you would like to share? Matter of fact, you don't have to.
No, I would tell you patience is also, I think patience for, type A personalities, overachievers, perfection and patience are our two Achilles heels, right? Like we're always trying to get the best we can get in the time, the shortest time possible. And that can have a negative impact on our teams. And I constantly have to ask myself, am I going too far? I've had my team call me out and say, hey, you're expecting more than we can deliver. Okay. I went too far. Thank you for letting me know. And I've also had them say that, and I've had to say, you know what? It's the client's expectation, or the executive team is asking us to push a little harder to get there. So, but yeah, probably patience and perfection, hand in hand, very dangerous. I have to constantly watch myself on those.
Agreed. All right, well, let's shift gears a little bit. Let's talk a little bit about automation. And you and I have talked about this a couple of times offline. We hear over and over again, you got to automate, you got to automate, you got to automate everything. You're talking to someone who's run an MDF company, an incentive company, TCMA, been involved pretty much and watched whole automation grow up. I'm talking MDF and incentives and PRM and TCMA and all that sort of stuff. So I realize it's not perfect, but everybody says, hey, automate, automate, automate. I'm curious your perspective, time savings involved, some of the challenges, and actually even what your team thinks about it, right? Because it's one thing to hear it from maybe a supplier or vendor. It's one thing to look at it from an executive level or management level, but I'm sort of curious how even your team thinks about that, right? And any side of automation, totally open.
Yeah. So look, especially now, automation is the answer to everything. The more you can automate, the more you can get done, the more accurate, potentially, right? That whatever process you're setting up, whatever reporting you're setting up, whatever support you're setting up, automation solves for a lot of the challenges we face today. The challenge we have is always build or buy, cost, and flexibility and agility, right? And as things are expanding and contracting, like we all built systems for expansion during COVID because all of a sudden everybody needed us, and technology was the place to be. Like it was great. And so we all hurried and built things or bought things. And then we started to see a contraction. And it's like, well, if we contract here, we're going to break that. Or if we remove this, then this isn't going to work. And so my team will say, look, we'll just build, a little process on our low code platform, or we'll go do this in Excel. And we've got things all over the place. And then how does it all interwork? And what ends up happening is you have manual processes tying automation together. That's what ends up happening.
And we used to call that automagical, right?
Automagical. That's a great
great on the front end, not so great on the back end.
Yeah, but I need experts like you to tell me and guide me on how do I deal with this? Because look, I'm one of those business, the client I mentioned earlier who had scope creep?
Yeah.
I'm guilty. Like I start out with a little project and by the time we're 2 weeks into it, I got 5 more ideas, and 3 weeks into it, I got 20 more ideas. And, a month into it, I got 60 more ideas. And so I know scope creep very well and am very guilty of it. And I need the platform vendors who really understand this stuff to say, this is the kind of thing that you want to plan for, or this is how you can bring this together. I've been in 7 or 8 different companies now, 9 companies. I've used all kinds of, best of breed and all kinds of homegrown, and they all have their advantages and disadvantages. And, I don't know what the next set of innovation is going to bring in this, but I certainly think the MarTech, especially landscape, is challenging to figure out how to build the right stack to drive your business and have that flexibility. It's tough.
It's tough. I do think, having been involved in, like I said, MDApp and incentives and PRM and TCAM, all of that, I do think there is a bright spot. I do think there's light at the end of the tunnel. It's not a train coming. It's going to work, but it's taken some time because I don't think everyone has really pulled together. I think a lot of the MarTech companies have been siloed in their thinking. And what happens, what you were talking about, when you start build or buy and you end up halfway, and we all sort of work together in this, right? When it's halfway, look, you can do anything in an Excel spreadsheet, but you can also make a lot of mistakes and it takes a lot of time. And everybody knows it's a problem. And then you end up with a bunch of silos. I do think the vendors out there are starting to figure all this out. I think another thing is they're all trying to figure out, how to truly make it a SaaS platform. You and I talked about that. Not everything that's out there is configurable. There's still a lot of coding. And I do think organizations are getting better at that. I get to be the first one that says ecosystem orchestration, whatever that means in someone's mind. The ideal piece is, I think you should have a piece of technology that has a single layer of data, has a single view across the top, and has a single data layer underneath it, and a bunch of apps run up underneath it, and it's all interchangeable. I mean, if I'm in your shoes, that's what I'm looking for. And maybe you're a year or two away from that being really, really good. I just don't see it not happening. Do you remember? You probably do remember, because we've both been doing this for a while. If you bought an India platform 10 years ago, it was all bespoke. It was all custom. Look, I used to have a programmer that a very large vendor would call on at midnight, and he would code it and fix it. And he was really happy. And I was like, that is not good. This does not scale. We can't do that. And then it makes it so hard for what your people to be successful, because I think the optimal supplier makes it really easy for you and your people to operate. It's not just, is it easy and simple for the partner, but it needs to be really easy and simple for you guys too. And I did think you get there.
Well, I think about it again, if I agree with you 100%. And I think about it even a step further. If we think about the client, right? So if a client has a technology stack to run their business, and we see that technology stack kind of play out over and over, you've got the MarTech stack, you've got the HR stack, you've got the ERP stack, right? And then you have kind of platforms like ours where they're building very specialized, highly transactional, workflow-based systems, right? But we see the same vendors over and over and over again. Wouldn't it be great if we had, I'm going to call it a marketplace. That might not be the right word, but an environment.
Okay, well, that's a whole separate conversation if we've got to go down there, because it'd be pretty cool if it all was there, right?
Yeah, like the ecosystem of each vendor's ecosystem played together to say, look, we're going to do enablement around the stack. We're going to do marketing around the stack. We're going to do, because when these clients are thinking about these things, they can't think about one app or one vendor in isolation. They've got to think about, hey, if I make this decision around this technology, it's going to affect all the other things. So how do these things play? And you don't see that very often. You might see two vendors going out with joint messaging or co-branding. You might see three now that the hyperscalers are doing a lot of the kind of co-marketing type of stuff. But you really, you don't have just three vendors in a true tech stack. You might have 7 or 8, 10. Why can't we figure out how to get a system where this stuff gets pulled together and we work together to enable that stack for the client? Thinking, putting the client first. Right. That would be an innovation where everybody feels safe. We're all getting our words in, we're all getting our messages, and we're getting to that buyer to make the buyer's decision and buyer's understanding of that stack so much better, faster, easier. That would be very cool. I don't know if we can get there, though.
So, okay, I think 3 things on that. First of all, the partners would love that, because partners, there's like 6, they understand there are other partners involved in it. You got an ISV, you got a reseller, you've got all sorts of partners that are coming in. So I think they would like that. There are a couple of organizations like Partnership Leaders is kind of interesting, right? They're a new and up and coming organization. I know they did Catalyst event in Miami last year, and they're doing one in Denver. And so they spent a lot of time talking about doing that. So I think there's organizations that are kind of thinking that way. I think partners would love it. Believe it or not, I hear distribution so distribution is trying to figure out how they add value. And they're sitting there thinking, okay, I don't want to just be a warehouse. I don't want to be a bank, but I see the partners here. I see all the vendors here. I see the end user here. They're actually in a pretty interesting place if you're talking on the long tail side in particular, to actually create this orchestration. And I think that actually makes a lot of sense. I think we're going to end up hitting there.
I've been out of the kind of direct contact to distribution for a couple of years now because Pega, we don't use distribution, but I do remember when I was at IBM, both Ingram and Tech Data were working around this, kind of trying to figure out how to bring it all together. And I haven't seen it as kind of a big play. They may already have it in place for their partners, but I know clients are still trying to piece some of this together themselves and would love the help of, how this could all come together. So,
yeah, I think it's a huge opportunity for someone. I totally agree. This goes all the way back. When I was an MSP in the 2000s, right? And I had 14 solutions as a managed service provider. I was like, why am I going to all these places for my MDF and incentives? Why couldn't I have it all in one place? So I think everybody's trying to streamline it. I think automation will get there. But I also think there's innovation that's going to help as well. So maybe we can wrap it up with, I think OpenAI and ChatGPT is everywhere. When I'm at a cocktail party and everybody's talking about ChatGPT for their kids, or I'm even at church and the pastor is talking about how he put his name in ChatGPT before his sermon, and it came up and some was good and some was bad. I mean, it's gone mainstream faster than anything that I've seen. As a matter of fact, ChatGPT is the fastest growing per user technology in history.
Yeah, I saw a chart. Where did I see that chart where it showed, like, compared to other technologies like face or social media and some of the other technologies, and then it had ChatGPT and it was like straight up, and everything else had kind of a nice line curve, but yeah, scary. But this is what everybody wants. Everybody wants a simple, like, ask a question and get an answer. Nobody wants to have to try to figure out the right syntax or the right questions or the right answers. And of course, all the students want their papers written. So
they do. But so wait, are you guys using ChatGPT? Have you guys got involved with it? Do you see that as a place in which you guys do?
Well, from a technology perspective, we have work underway with GPT now. We are a strategic partner with Google. So there's announcement. We made a pre-announce. We announced our intention, and we have our big event coming up in June. I'm sure there will be some announcements there on how we've integrated GPT into and our own expansion of our own AI work in our platform. From my perspective, I was just having a conversation with our team about, where does our portal go with, instead of people searching for things or having to go through a process on the site, why can't I just go in and say, tell me how to XYZ, fill in the blank, and have chat just give me the answer, right? Why, especially for partners that don't have a direct relationship and are exploring or building their business around us and aren't yet in the formal program, and they just want to know how to engage us. That would be ideal. So we are having those conversations and trying to lay out our plan for how we get there.
So we're seeing it from our perspective. We're channel marketing automation platform. It's pretty interesting, right? Even at the most base level, what I've seen, partners' biggest fear, besides not having content or not having leads, is what to do when they get content, right? And it's a real challenge. You could go out and create the best content in the world, and you send it to a partner, especially the small partners, and they're like, oh my gosh, how do I send an email on the subject line to this vertical? And I know that sounds silly, but it's not. It's a frozen moment for a partner, who a lot of them don't have big marketing teams, to understand how to do something like that. And it's not perfect, but it's pretty amazing. And that's the road we're going to go down to is, how do we help you get your content to those partners and get those partners to really use it? Because if they can engage and get a subject line in an email to a particular vertical, now we're going to have to train something like ChatGPT in our instance, right? So it's all up to date, but that's totally doable. Just a huge time saver. And that's at a very basic level. I mean, I'm sure OpenAI could do so many things, but I just think from a marketing perspective in the channel, it can really, really be a time saver for partners.
Yeah, 100% agree. I mean, look, none of us have the patience. Our patience keeps getting shorter and shorter and shorter. Our attention spans get shorter and shorter and shorter. So do I want to go do a bunch of homework to figure something out? No, I just want somebody to tell me how to do it. And tell me the probabilities of my success, right? Of doing this, because I could see where I would get an automated recommendation, but I'd want to be able to validate in some way, like, did they mean for this to be my answer? Like, how do I go out and verify that? That's the one thing, and maybe it's just me and my suspicious mind. You know, was this just the trained answer for somebody that sort of looks like me, or is it really going to work for me? How do I validate that? So that's the one thing. And I guess I would just ask different questions to see what kind of different answers I would get to circle around back to that. But yeah, if I can ask a question and get a recommendation without having to spend hours searching websites or reading white papers on best practices, why not?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think, you've got to be able to validate it for sure. I think you need to be able to train it and make sure that it's all up to date. And I think you need to understand, I think we're going to learn, how do we prompt? It's not just do I ask a question, how do I ask that right questions? But I do agree with this, validate across, so use ChatGPT and you validate it with Google. I mean, there's got to be a way to validate this, right?
Well, when you were saying that, I was just thinking, so, everybody started relying on ratings and rankings, right? So if GPT is recommending things, what's going to happen with ratings and rankings? And how will I value ratings and rankings versus what GPT is telling me what to do? It'll be interesting to see what behaviors start to emerge in the way we think and react to those things.
Right.
Because we've all gotten trained to go look at what's the star rating on that thing right now, right?
Yeah, I wonder, like, you look at, G2 to Yelp. I mean, everything we do, how many stars it has, what is it? This would be absolutely fat. Would there be influencers on ChatGPT? Look, I think
that's interesting.
That is really interesting. It is, right? Who's going to influence ChatGPT? Okay, we could open Pandora's box, but literally, if you just want to be able to write an email and make it sound half decent, there's some of the simplest things possible that you can save so much time. But then once you get broader, then yes, I think the answer is going to be, what do you plug into it? But remember, information's only as good as what you get plugged into. So we could take ChatGPT, for instance, on our system, if your partners were using it and your website and all of your information was plugged into it, so it was accurate and updated on a regular time. And then if they searched anything about you, it would be dependent on your website and your information. That's going to be totally doable. You're going to have plugins to this that are going to be validated by whatever you as a vendor or anybody think is plugged into it. I mean, there's going to be plugins back and forth on all this stuff. So yeah, technology is really interesting. We'll see where something like ChatGPT goes, right? I think it's inevitable. The question is, how do we make it really work? When does it become mainstream? Someone argues it's already mainstream. So I think we'll see how it plays in the channel, but it has a place.
I have another technology question sort of for you.
Okay.
So, Bitcoin.
Okay.
Digital currency. There was a lot of talk, and I remember I'm a huge proponent until the FTX thing happened. Now I have a question mark.
Yeah, that brought up a few question marks. Sure.
Yeah. So, but at one point there was a lot of conversation about marketplaces based on digital currency and or exchange of Bitcoin. Do you guys see the market continuing to evolve and embrace digital currency as a way to support some of this go-to-market activity and giving partners the ability to earn digital currency through activity and then spend that digital currency and go to market? Or is the world going to remain based in, cash payment?
Look, I think that's a great question. I think there's two sides to it. I think, are partners going to start to be scored on everything they do And that's how we reward, motivate, or incentivize them. I 100% agree. The whole tiering, and everybody goes, "Oh, tiering systems, I'm going to do it." I'm sorry. It's just another way of tiering. It is a better way, I think, to tier things, right? Because you're basing it on it's a meritocracy, right? And you're basing it on what they do. So I absolutely believe in scoring-based reward systems. What the currency is that's in there, it could be all over the place. I had a vendor come to me and said, "Hey, we've got all these MDF dollars that all these rebate dollars that someone has earned, and we can either pay them a rebate, but what if we gave them MDF dollars instead and gave them a bonus?" And this was 10 years ago. I was like, okay, you're definitely showing me that we need to figure out how to motivate partners to take their money and spend it in the most productive way. But some partners, top line, bottom line, and actually, do you really care if they're successful in driving revenue, right? Every partner is going to be a little bit different. So I think the answer is yes, all over the place. How we're going to reward them and what sort of currency? Honestly, I don't have a great answer on that.
Interesting. There's a lot of opportunity, right? Again, to build marketing marketplaces.
Yeah.
Where multiple vendors come together and can buy and sell services. And it just makes it easier if everybody's using the same system, and there's some tracking in that. So I think that's still an innovation to kind of catch up with the IT marketplace in some way.
I think so. All right. So one last thing. Is that it? Do you have opportunity? One last thought? Anything you want to leave our listeners or viewers with? Anything that, hey, I'll take it back. So what do you think about on business when you wake up in the morning? What's the first thing on your mind?
The first thing on mind is, I guess, how can I do more better? Like, where are we on point? Where do we have gaps, and where have we not started? So it's, start, stop, continue kind of thinking. And I think trying to meet our partners and our clients where they are and supporting that motion is our biggest challenge and opportunity at the moment, because everybody's going through some kind of change right now, and just trying to run a program as it's published is probably not very meaningful at the moment. I think we need that as guidance and guidelines, but we really need to be responsive to the challenges everybody's going through right now, and help each other get through that over the next, whatever the economist.
That's a good, yeah. So okay, last piece, back to the action. So how long do you think we're going to be in this? Do you have any idea? Have you thought about that? Are we 6 months, 12 months? What do you think?
I'm not an economist, that's for sure. And the thing is, it's very mixed. It's like there's some bright, sharp stars and good things happening. And then there's some challenges. And every time I turn on the news and I see, in OPEC cut production and raise prices, that's not a good sign.
Yeah.
Right? Or interest rates go up again. Not a good sign. But, on the other hand, we're closing new customers and new business. That's a great sign. Clients are driving their digital transformation initiatives forward. And I know that's kind of a tired expression. These are not simple transitions they're going through. These are, 3-year journeys that started. They were kind of forced into accelerate because of COVID, and they're continuing to pull those through to completion. So we're seeing continued very positive movement for our clients, but very cautiously. So I'm hoping we're out of this in early 2024. I don't know.
Cautiously optimistic.
Yeah, I think so.
That's a pretty good way to go. All right, look, Jamie, thank you for spending some time with us.
Thank you.
So what's the best way for anyone to get in touch with you?
I'm on LinkedIn, Jamie Mendez on J.A. Mendez on LinkedIn. Twitter, I'm always reading Twitter. I haven't posted in a while, but either way, and happy to connect with anyone that wants to chat about marketing marketplaces and or how we go to market together in the tech stack.
All right. Once again, thank you very much. Listeners, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Steve.
Have a great day.
you.